friendship, oftentimes as we have it around us, is tied to some benefits. So people usually become friends because of what they think they can gain from the other person. So it can be because of the insights, maybe because of the knowledge of the person, but oftentimes people make friends for material gains. They make friends because of some worldly benefit they want to gain from the other person. But the friendship of faith is usually stronger. And the friendship that existed between the Prophet ﷺ and Abubakr went beyond material benefits. Even though the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that there is none that had benefited from his wealth more than the wealth of Abubakr. But the kind of friendship that existed went much more beyond that. It was a friendship that was based on faith, conviction on the truth of the message of Islam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also told us in the Quran, Al-akhillahu yawma idin ba'duhum li ba'd aduwwun illa al-muttaqin. The friendship on the day of judgment, or friends on the day of judgment, will become foes, except for those whose friendship is based upon a taqwa. So their friendship was actually based on the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on striving in order to benefit the entire ummah, especially with the message of Tawheed. We all understand that as Muslims, there's one very important thing about the faith. You can't really be a true Muslim if there's no yaqeen. That's certainty of faith, an element of trust. If you have engaged for a while with a person, I understand the person's mindset. You know what the person can do and what the person cannot do. The Prophet ﷺ, even prior to his commissioning as a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was known to be a truthful person. Abu Bakr knew that about the Prophet ﷺ. If he didn't lie in his interpersonal engagement with people, why would the Prophet lie with respect to the message he claimed he received from Allah? If he never lied with respect to his human-to-human interaction, it would not have been expected that the Prophet ﷺ would have lied with respect to receiving revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abu Bakr understood that fact, and he also understood the message that the Prophet brought. Like we mentioned, he was never convinced about the idolatry that was practiced by the people of his time. So when the Prophet ﷺ came with the clear message of Tawheed, he was quick to understand that that exactly is the true path that anyone should seek after. So that was what contributed to the conviction of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. So he was convinced, and that conviction was not just by accident. It went through a process that took time and time to nurture. So I would say that it's also expected of us as Muslims that we take the time to restudy our faith, understand it, become convinced. Oftentimes today, when you see people or you hear stories of someone leaving Islam, you are so sure that this person really never understood the religion, because you cannot understand Islam and leave Islam. Islam is a religion. The more you learn about it, the more you get convinced about the truth of its message. Reading the story of the migration of the Prophet ﷺ from Mecca to the city of Medina, you will learn quite a lot of lessons in sabr, patience, and also in strategies, even strategies of war. You understand that clearly when you read the story. So the fact that Abu Bakr used to walk in front of the Prophet and walk behind him, primarily is the intention of protecting the Rasul. It was very close to the Rasul, and the Prophet shared a whole lot of his strategy with him. So all of those are just meant to protect the Prophet, because he wouldn't want any harm to come to the Rasul. Rather, whatever it is that would have hurt the Rasul, he would prefer to lay down his life in order to protect his friend. So that was the intention. Okay, it's good you said I should imagine. So I should imagine if I were to be the one in the cave with the Rasul. First, that would have been a very great privilege because Abu Bakr being in the cave with the Rasul, uh, it was a lesson in tawakkul, in reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was a person of faith, but we have our own human frailties. So when he saw what he saw, he became afraid, not just for himself, but for his friend, the Prophet ﷺ. He was very afraid that it's not possible that we are going to meet with doom in this cave. And the Prophet ﷺ reassured him with those words, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentioned in the Quran. So what will be the case of two? Wallahu thalithuhuma. Those two whom Allah is the third. So, would I have done anything differently? I would have said no. Because those are the best of us. Even being in the cave with the Rasul would have been the greatest privilege. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to even mention that event in the Quran is virtue and excellence upon virtue on Abu Bakr Siddiq. And Allah knows. He knows our state of Iman. I don't have the kind of Iman that Abu Bakr had. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the discussion, that the Iman of Abu Bakr outweighs the Iman of every person of this Ummah, apart from the Rasul Sallallahu. So, how are we so sure? If I were to be in the cave, if you would not have even done something that would be tantamount to kufr. So, I like the way you said it. I should just imagine. So, I imagine in the positive light. But in that sense, I don't think I will have done anything different. Or I hope I will not have done anything different from what Abu Bakr did. So Abu Bakr Siddiq, radiyallahu anhu, like we did mention, he was a man that always strove for the common good. Anything that he sees is going to be of benefit to the Ummah of Islam, he will strive. And perchance, maybe just to take us memory lane, after he accepted Islam, the major personnel that accepted Islam after him were mostly through the hands of Abu Bakr, the likes of Uthman ibn Affan, and a number of those who were the 10 that the Prophet ﷺ gave the testimony of Jannah in the earthly life. They accepted Islam primarily on account of the engagement of Abu Bakr with them, not even directly from the Rasul ﷺ. So it speaks to the fact that it was someone that always sought after the good of the Ummah. And that also transcends to those who were actually lowly from amongst the companions of the Prophet at the time. Like you mentioned, the likes of Bilal. So Bilal was a slave. And when he proclaimed acceptance of Islam, he was afflicted, he was tortured by his owners. And Abu Bakr Siddiq felt that level of humanity, that helplessness, such that whatever it is he could do in order to assuage or to lower the sufferings of the Muslims, he would do. He spent his wealth in emancipating so many slaves, not because he wants to acquire them and take them in as his own slaves, but just to emancipate them solely for the benefit of Islam and solely for the pleasure of Allah. So the event around the death of the Rasul was actually a watershed in the history of Islam, a very important moment. And sometimes when you're being used to a personality in the person of the Rasul, so you expect that sometimes people will become so much attached to him. We had some of the companions that actually never believed that the Rasul had died. So they actually doubted. Even Umar ibn Khattab, we have narrations that said Umar got infuriated that anybody that says that Muhammad is dead, I'm going to kill such a person. Because he couldn't just see himself agreeing to the situation, what had really happened. When the Prophet died, Abu Bakr was not in town. And when he came to town, he came and when he was told of the death of the Prophet, he went into the room where the Prophet was laid, and he kissed the Prophet in his forehead. And he said some words when he met with the Prophet. He said, Bi abi anta wa ummi tibta hayyan wa mayyita. Say, I ransom you with my father and my mother. You are pure in life or in living and in death. Even in your death, it shows that you are on the purest, you are the purest mind, the purest heart. You are pure whilst alive and even in death. And when Abubakr noticed the bewilderment of many of the companions, he said those words that you mentioned. He said, Man kana ya'budu Muhammadan fa'inna Muhammadan qad mat. That if anyone amongst you had been worshipping Muhammad, then he should realize that indeed Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has died. And he said, وَمَنْ كَانَ يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ فِي السَّمَاءِ حَيٌّ لَا يَمُوتُ. But if any one of you had been worshipping Allah, then let him come to the realization that Allah is in the heavens, living and will never die. And he recited the verse of Surah Al-Imran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said about the Prophet, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ رُسُلٌ أَفَإِنْ مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلَ انقلبتم على أعقابكم وَمَنْ ينقلب على عقبيه فلن يضر الله شيئا وسيجزي الله شاكرين. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse that وَمَا Muhammad is no more than a messenger. قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. And indeed, messengers had come before him. He won't be the first. So he also experienced what the messengers before him experienced. So he wouldn't be the first messenger, such that you assume eternity for him. Messengers did come before him, and they died. So وَمَا Muhammad illa Rasul. So it shouldn't be strange to you too, that Muhammad lived amongst you, and now he has met with the reality, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has defined for him, that he took his soul. وَمَا Muhammad illa Rasul. قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. Messengers did come before him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَفَإِن مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلَ انقلبتم على عقبكم. So if he were to die or he was killed, will you then turn back on your heels, not accepting the message of Islam? Towards the end of the verse, when Abu Bakr, when he recited this verse, many of the companions, including Umar ibn Khattab, had said that it was as if the verse was just revealed, as if we had never recited that verse before. They had actually recited it a number of times. And perhaps maybe we step back a bit. There was a time too that the Prophet ﷺ actually came to the minbar, and he was with his companions. Abu Bakr was there. And the Prophet was telling them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave a servant of his a choice between living eternally in enjoyment of the earthly life or the hereafter. And the slave chose to be with Allah. Now when the Prophet said this, Abu Bakr started crying. And he said, may our mothers and fathers be sacrificed in place of you, Messenger of Allah. The companions who were then with the Prophet, they were amazed. So they were shocked at the statement of Abu Bakr. That, okay, what has the Prophet said? And what is the response of Abu Bakr? So the Prophet has only mentioned that Allah has given a choice to a servant of his, either to live eternally in enjoyment or to return to him. And he has made a choice. But they didn't understand that it was actually the Prophet that was speaking about himself. He was the one that Allah gave a choice. So Abu Bakr actually knew from that statement of the Prophet that the Prophet was about to die. The other companions did not understand the depth of the message of the Rasul at that point in time. So he had prepared his mind well ahead of the event. So when the Prophet died and the rest of the companions became shocked of the reality of the death of the Rasul, Abu Bakr was not shocked because he had prepared his mind for that particular event. And that's why he was able to remind them. And that also speaks to his leadership qualities and the fact that he was one of the most knowledgeable of the companions of the Prophet. You know, leadership comes when everybody's bewildered, when everybody doesn't know what next to do. That someone will come in the midst of the confusion and be able to set apart a direction. That is leadership. And that was what Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu did at the event of the death of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam.